Ryan Cole's breath fogged in the crisp morning air as he stepped out onto the porch of his modest suburban home, the neighborhood stretching out before him like a quiet, well-tended garden. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow on the manicured lawns and neatly trimmed hedges. It was a world away from the chaos he'd left behind, a life marked by combat deployments and the ever-present edge of danger. Here, in this peaceful enclave, Ryan sought something he hadn't known in years: normalcy. Before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I want to know, have you ever had a neighbor you just couldn't get along with? What happened? Share your story in the comments below. Behind him, a low rumble turned into a joyful bark as Coda, his loyal Malamute, bounded eagerly into the yard. Towering and energetic, Coda was impossible to miss. His thick, silver-gray fur shimmered in the morning light as he circled Ryan, his tail wagging like a banner proclaiming their arrival. The dog was both a comfort and a challenge, an embodiment of Ryan's own restless spirit, needing space and purpose. Ryan knelt to scratch behind Coda's ear, feeling the familiar weight of the dog's head against his palm. "Easy, boy," he murmured, chuckling softly. Coda's enthusiasm was a constant contrast to the stillness Ryan craved. Yet the dog's presence was his tether to this new life, a reminder that loyalty and companionship could still exist beyond the battlefield. The neighborhood itself was deceptively tranquil. Rows of identical houses lined the streets, each with its own patch of carefully tended lawn, flower beds bursting with color, and cars parked with precise regularity. Children's bicycles lay abandoned on porches, and the occasional neighbor waved as they went about their morning routines. But beneath the surface of this suburban calm, Ryan sensed a subtle undercurrent, an invisible tension woven into the fabric of the community. He had learned quickly that the neighborhood was close-knit, where everyone knew each other's schedules, habits, and histories. It was a place where appearances mattered, and deviations from the norm did not go unnoticed. Ryan's arrival had already stirred whispers, his stoic demeanor and military background marking him as an outsider. The presence of Coda, with his size and bark that could shatter glass, only intensified the unease. Across the street, Ryan spotted Mrs. Evelyn Harper tending to her rose bushes, her posture rigid with age and habit. Her silver hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her sharp eyes flicked toward Coda as he trotted past, his tail wagging but his bark echoing through the quiet morning. Mrs. Harper's lips pressed into a thin line, a look of disapproval etched deeply on her face. Ryan had met her once or twice, brief nods and polite smiles that never quite reached her eyes. She was the neighborhood's unofficial guardian of order, a woman who cherished routine and control. Her house was immaculate, the lawn perfectly edged, and her reputation for vigilance was well known. Ryan had heard from a neighbor that Mrs. Harper found Coda unsettling, complaining quietly about the dog's barking and his intimidating presence. It was a tension that Ryan understood well. How fear and misunderstanding could build walls between people who might otherwise coexist peacefully. Ryan rose from the porch steps, taking a deep breath that filled his lungs with the scent of fresh-cut grass and dew. This neighborhood was supposed to be his sanctuary, a place to rebuild after the years of conflict. But the challenges here were subtle, rooted in human nature rather than enemy fire. Coda's bark shattered the morning silence again, a sharp reminder that peace was not always quiet. He walked toward the edge of the yard, glancing down the street where other neighbors were beginning their day. A delivery truck rumbled past, and a child's laughter floated from a nearby driveway. The world was moving forward, indifferent to his past or his plans. Ryan knew he would have to find his place here, not only as a man, but as a member of this community. That afternoon, Ryan took Coda for a walk around the neighborhood. The dog's heavy paws thudding against the pavement as he sniffed every tree and mailbox with eager curiosity. The sun was higher now, warming the air, but the unease Ryan felt lingered beneath the surface. As they passed Mrs. Harper's house, she stood on her porch, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Coda's tail wagged, but he held his distance, sensing the woman's discomfort. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Harper," Ryan called, forcing a friendly tone. She nodded stiffly, her gaze flicking to Coda before meeting Ryan's eyes. "Good afternoon, Ryan," she replied curtly. "I hope Coda isn't causing too much trouble." Ryan smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "He's still adjusting. I'm working on training him to be quieter." Mrs. Harper's lips pressed tighter. "I trust you'll do your best. Some of us prefer a little more peace and quiet." Ryan nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. It wasn't just about noise. It was about control and comfort, about fitting into a place that demanded conformity. Yet, Coda was part of who Ryan was now, an extension of his need for loyalty, protection, and a bond that transcended words. As they continued their walk, Ryan noticed small signs of life beneath the calm facade. Neighbors exchanging brief greetings, children playing in yards, and windows opening to let in the late spring air. The neighborhood was alive, but it carried secrets too, whispered in the creak of floorboards and the rustle of leaves. Back at home that evening, Ryan sat on the couch, Coda resting his massive head on Ryan's knee. The dog's steady breathing was a balm against the quiet hum of the television. Ryan's mind drifted to the years spent in distant lands, the missions where every moment held the threat of violence. Here the threat was subtler, an invisible edge sharpened by suspicion and unspoken grievances. He was determined to make this place work, to turn the neighborhood into a home where he could finally exhale. But he knew it wouldn't be simple. Coda's presence was a blessing and a challenge, a living reminder that peace required vigilance, and trust was something earned, not given freely. As darkness settled outside, Ryan glanced at Coda, whose eyes shone with unwavering loyalty. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead in this quiet suburb, where beneath the neat lawns and painted fences, the true nature of community was waiting to be tested. Days passed, and the subtle tensions in the neighborhood began to surface more clearly, like ripples spreading across an otherwise still pond. Ryan found himself caught in the middle, his presence, and Coda's unmistakable size and bark, drawing both wary glances and outright complaints. It wasn't long before the Homeowners Association called a meeting, summoned to address concerns voiced by Mrs. Evelyn Harper and a few other residents. That morning, Ryan stood at the edge of his driveway, watching as neighbors gathered on the street, voices low but urgent. The sky above was a dull gray, heavy with the threat of rain, and the air carried the faint scent of wet earth and budding leaves. Coda sat obediently at Ryan's side, his calm demeanor belying the undercurrent of unease that Ryan felt tightening like a noose. Mrs. Harper was already there, her posture as rigid as ever, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her eyes flicked toward Coda, who met her gaze without flinching, a silent challenge passing between dog and owner. Ryan had to remind himself that Coda's presence was more than just a source of comfort. It was a symbol of the change Ryan represented, and that unsettled some in the community. The meeting began with the HOA president, a middle-aged man with a nervous smile and a clipboard, calling the gathering to order. As neighbors took turns voicing their concerns, it became clear that Coda was the focal point. His barking, his size, and the perception that he might be a danger to the neighborhood's delicate peace had unsettled more than just Mrs. Harper. Ryan listened carefully, his military-honed instincts alert to the underlying fears behind the words. It wasn't just about noise. It was about control, safety, and the fragility of the neighborhood's carefully maintained order. When it was his turn, Ryan spoke calmly, his voice steady and measured. "I understand the concerns," he said. "Coda is still adjusting, and I'm committed to training him to be quieter and more controlled. But he's also a part of my life, my protection, and my companion. I'm working on it, and I appreciate your patience." There was a murmur from the crowd, some nods, but Mrs. Harper's expression remained hard. Ryan caught her eye again, and this time she gave a curt nod before turning away. The conversation moved on, but the message was clear. Acceptance would not come easily. In the days that followed, Ryan dedicated himself to training Coda. Mornings were spent with a professional dog trainer who specialized in working with large breeds and high-energy dogs. Commands were drilled, distractions introduced, and boundaries set. Coda responded well, eager to please, but his natural instincts made silence a challenge. Despite the progress, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something else was brewing in the neighborhood, something beyond mere complaints about a dog. Strange noises echoed through the streets at night. Footsteps on the pavement, rustling in the bushes, whispers that faded when approached. Reports of suspicious activity circulated quietly among the residents. Missing packages, unexplained lights, and shadows moving just out of sight. One evening, as Ryan and Coda returned from a late training session, the sun dipping below the horizon and casting long shadows, Ryan noticed a figure darting between cars parked along the street. Coda's ears perked instantly, his body tensing with alertness. Ryan's hand tightened on the leash, muscles coiling with readiness. "Easy, Coda," Ryan whispered. But the dog's focus was unbreakable. The figure vanished down a side alley before Ryan could react, leaving only the faint scent of something metallic and the echo of hurried footsteps. It was the kind of fleeting glimpse that set nerves on edge. The first tangible sign that the neighborhood's surface calm was deceptive. Ryan decided to increase his own vigilance. He walked Coda in different patterns each night, scanning the shadows and listening for anything unusual. His military training reminded him that awareness was the first line of defense, and Coda's keen senses were an invaluable asset. When he mentioned the strange noises and sightings to a few neighbors, including Mrs. Harper, their reactions were mixed. Some dismissed the reports as paranoia, the product of overactive imaginations fueled by the recent complaints. Others exchanged worried glances, but said little. Mrs. Harper, however, surprised Ryan by offering a terse acknowledgement. "I've noticed it too," she said one afternoon as they crossed paths near the mailbox. Her tone was less sharp, more resigned. "People see things when they're afraid." Ryan nodded. "I want to help. Maybe we can organize something. Neighborhood watches, patrols, anything to keep everyone safe." Mrs. Harper hesitated, then gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. It wouldn't hurt. Encouraged, Ryan began talking to other residents, gauging interest in a more coordinated approach to security. Some were eager, relieved to have someone taking initiative. Others were skeptical, unwilling to believe the neighborhood could harbor anything dangerous. But the seed of vigilance had been planted. By the end of the week, Ryan and Mrs. Harper found themselves working together more often than either would have expected. They coordinated schedules for nightly walks with Coda, sharing information about unusual activity and discussing ways to improve lighting and security cameras. The old woman's sharp eye and Ryan's tactical experience complemented each other, building a fragile alliance grounded in mutual concern. Coda became a central figure in their efforts. His presence alone was a deterrent, his imposing stature and alert demeanor signaling that the neighborhood was no longer an easy target. Yet Ryan also trained him to be calm and controlled during patrols, aware that an overly aggressive dog could create more problems than it solved. One night, as Ryan and Mrs. Harper walked the perimeter of the neighborhood with Coda leading the way, the air was thick with anticipation. The streetlights flickered through a mist that had settled over the asphalt, the silence punctuated only by the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer, every rustle more pronounced. Suddenly, Coda stiffened, his hackles rising as a faint sound reached his ears, a soft, shuffling noise coming from a nearby yard. Ryan's hand instinctively went to the pocket where he kept his phone, ready to call for backup if needed. Mrs. Harper clutched her flashlight tighter, her knuckles white. From the darkness, a figure emerged. A silhouette hesitant and slow, carrying what looked like a bag. Coda growled low and steady, a warning that sent a shiver down Ryan's spine. The figure froze, then bolted toward the street, disappearing into the night. Ryan and Mrs. Harper exchanged a glance. The threat was real, and it was closer than they had imagined. Their neighborhood, once a refuge from chaos, was now a battleground of vigilance and trust. And Coda, ever faithful, was ready to stand guard. The night air was thick with tension as Ryan and Mrs. Harper stood at the edge of the yard where the figure had disappeared moments before. Coda remained alert, his muscular body poised like a coiled spring, ears perked and eyes scanning the shadows. The streetlight above flickered, casting intermittent illumination on the damp grass and a scattering of fallen leaves. Ryan pulled out his phone, fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He dialed the local police department, his voice calm but urgent as he reported the suspicious person fleeing through the neighborhood. The dispatcher assured him that officers would be dispatched immediately. Minutes later, the distant wail of sirens cut through the night, growing louder as patrol cars approached. Ryan and Mrs. Harper exchanged a glance. Years of difference and initial friction momentarily bridged by a shared sense of urgency. Coda sniffed the air, his breath visible in the cold, and then began to track, nose low to the ground. The officers arrived, flashlights piercing the darkness as they fanned out to search the perimeter. Ryan briefed them quickly, pointing toward the path the intruder had taken. The police moved swiftly, their radios crackling with updates as the search intensified. An hour later, the lead officer returned, holding a small bundle wrapped in a plastic bag. A collection of stolen items, including jewelry and electronics, gathered from recent burglaries plaguing the neighborhood. Ryan recognized the intrusion wasn't random. This was part of a larger pattern that had been quietly unsettling the residents. Mrs. Harper's face, usually so stern and unyielding, softened as she looked at the recovered goods. So it was true, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Ryan nodded. Coda's sense of danger helped us catch this early. Whoever it is, they've been targeting this neighborhood for a while. The officers assured them they would increase patrols and investigate further. But Ryan knew the threat wasn't over. The intruder was just one piece of a larger puzzle, a web of criminal activity that had found its way into their quiet suburban streets. Over the next few days, Mrs. Harper's attitude toward Coda shifted noticeably. Where there had once been suspicion and discomfort, now there was a grudging respect. She caught herself watching the dog closely, noting his calm demeanor and fierce loyalty. One afternoon, Ryan found her watering her roses when he walked by with Coda. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying an unexpected warmth. "For everything you and Coda have done. I was wrong about him." Ryan offered a small smile. It's not easy to change first impressions, but Coda and I are here to help. Their alliance deepened as they began organizing neighborhood watches. Ryan took the lead in training volunteers, teaching them how to remain vigilant without becoming paranoid. Coda was central to these patrols, his presence both a deterrent and a symbol of the community's renewed strength. The neighborhood began to feel different, a subtle shift from fear to cautious hope. Residents who had once kept to themselves started sharing information and looking out for one another. Mrs. Harper, once the most vocal critic of Ryan and Coda, was now one of their strongest supporters. One evening, during a routine patrol, Ryan and Coda responded to a sudden noise near Mrs. Harper's house. A masked intruder was attempting to pry open a window. Without hesitation, Coda lunged forward, teeth bared and growling fiercely. The attacker stumbled back, startled and unprepared for the dog's swift defense. Ryan moved quickly, shouting for the intruder to stop while reaching for his phone to call the police. The commotion roused neighbors, and within moments, flashing lights illuminated the street as officers arrived. The intruder was apprehended, caught red-handed with tools used in previous break-ins. Mrs. Harper rushed outside, shaken but unharmed. She looked at Coda with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "You saved me," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Ryan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Coda's just doing his job. We're all safer because of him." The incident became a turning point for the neighborhood. News of the thwarted break-in spread quickly, reinforcing the importance of unity and vigilance. Ryan, Mrs. Harper, and Coda were no longer seen as outsiders, but as protectors. A team that had faced the darkness and stood firm. In the days that followed, the police made several arrests connected to the burglary ring plaguing the area. Evidence collected from the apprehended intruder linked him to a string of crimes targeting elderly residents, explaining the heightened anxiety among neighbors. Mrs. Harper's transformation was evident. She began attending community meetings regularly, advocating for safety measures and encouraging others to participate. Her earlier complaints about Coda were replaced by stories of his bravery and loyalty. Ryan found a renewed sense of purpose in these efforts. The neighborhood, once a place of quiet suspicion, was evolving into a community bound by trust and shared responsibility. Coda remained at his side, a steadfast guardian and friend. Together, they had uncovered a deeper threat lurking beneath the surface of suburban life. But more importantly, they had forged connections that transcended fear and prejudice. The neighborhood was changing, and so were they. All because a large, energetic dog and his determined owner refused to back down. The neighborhood, once rattled by fear and suspicion, began to pulse with a cautious resilience. Ryan, Mrs. Harper, and Coda had become an unlikely triumvirate, their alliance a beacon for residents seeking safety and solidarity. But the battle was far from over. The arrest of one intruder had revealed only the tip of a sprawling network that threatened to unravel the fragile peace they were rebuilding. Ryan stood in the community center's modest meeting room, the soft hum of fluorescent lights above casting a sterile glow over the assembled neighbors. Faces both familiar and wary turned toward him as he outlined the next steps. Maps of the neighborhood were pinned to the walls, marked with areas of concern and recent incidents. The air was thick with anticipation, a mix of hope and unease. "We've seen the pattern," Ryan explained, pointing to clusters of red dots on the map. "These break-ins aren't random. They're coordinated, and they're targeting the most vulnerable among us." Mrs. Harper sat near the front, her posture straighter now, her sharp eyes absorbing every detail. She had become a vocal advocate, her earlier reservation supplanted by a fierce determination to protect her community. "We need to organize neighborhood watches," Ryan continued. "Volunteers will patrol in pairs during the evening and overnight hours. Coda and I will lead the initial patrols, but everyone must be vigilant. Communication is key. Any unusual activity, no matter how small, should be reported immediately." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, but the weight of responsibility settled heavily on those present. The residents were stepping into roles they had never imagined, their complacency replaced by an urgent need to defend their homes and neighbors. Over the following days, Ryan and Mrs. Harper coordinated schedules, assigning patrols and training volunteers in basic security measures. Ryan's military experience proved invaluable. He taught the group how to move quietly, observe without being seen, and respond calmly under pressure. Coda became a central figure in these efforts, his imposing presence reassuring to some and intimidating to others, but always effective. The patrols began cautiously, with small groups walking the streets on rotating shifts. Neighbors who once avoided each other now exchanged nods and quiet conversations during these walks. The shared purpose forged bonds that had been missing, transforming the neighborhood into a community. Yet, the criminals lurking in the shadows were not idle. One night, as Ryan and Mrs. Harper walked their usual patrol route, Coda suddenly stiffened, ears pricked and hackles raised. The air grew thick with tension as a faint noise, a whisper of movement, drifted from a nearby alley. Ryan's hand moved instinctively to his pocket, fingers wrapping around the flashlight he always carried. From the darkness, two figures emerged, moving swiftly with intent. Ryan's heart pounded, adrenaline sharpening his senses. "Stay close," he whispered to Mrs. Harper, his voice low but firm. Coda growled, a deep, warning rumble that echoed in the cold night air. The intruders froze momentarily, assessing the unexpected obstacle. Ryan's military training kicked in as he calculated their next move. The figures split, one darting toward Mrs. Harper's house while the other made for the street. Ryan shouted, his voice carrying authority as he called out for them to stop. Mrs. Harper hurried to lock her door, hands trembling but determined. Coda lunged toward the intruder near the street, his powerful body moving with precision and speed. The attacker stumbled, surprised by the dog's sudden aggression. Ryan closed the distance, ready to intervene if necessary. The chaos drew the attention of nearby neighbors, who stepped outside with flashlights and phones in hand. The intruders, realizing the neighborhood was alert and united, retreated into the darkness, disappearing before the police could arrive. The encounter left the community shaken, but resolute. The attempted attack underscored the seriousness of the threat and the importance of their collective vigilance. Ryan, Mrs. Harper, and the neighborhood volunteers intensified their efforts, improving lighting, installing security cameras, and reinforcing doors and windows. In the days that followed, Ryan and Mrs. Harper worked closely with local law enforcement, sharing information and coordinating responses. The police increased patrols, and tips from the neighborhood watches led to several arrests connected to the burglary ring. The network that had once operated with impunity was being dismantled piece by piece. Mrs. Harper, once wary and distant, now stood alongside Ryan as a leader of the community. Her transformation was evident in the way she spoke at meetings, her voice steady and commanding. She had become a symbol of the neighborhood's resilience and determination. One afternoon, as Ryan and Mrs. Harper reviewed patrol schedules, Coda rested at their feet, his presence a constant reassurance. The dog's calm eyes met Ryan's, a silent bond forged through shared trials. "We've come a long way," Mrs. Harper said quietly. I never thought I'd see the neighborhood like this. Ryan smiled, the weight of their journey settling around him. Neither did I. But we're stronger now, because we faced it together. The neighborhood had changed. Fear and suspicion had been replaced by trust and cooperation. The road ahead remained uncertain, but Ryan, Mrs. Harper, and Coda were ready to face whatever challenges came next, united in purpose and unshaken in resolve. The night had settled deep over the neighborhood, blanketing the streets in a quiet stillness that felt heavier than usual. Ryan stood at the edge of his driveway, Coda at his side, muscles taut and senses alert. The dog's ears flicked toward every sound, the distant hum of a car engine, the rustle of leaves in the gentle wind, the faint crunch of footsteps on gravel. Tonight, they were not just walking a familiar route. They were preparing for what might be the most critical patrol yet. Rumors had been swirling for days, whispers of a coordinated strike by the burglary ring trying to reclaim lost ground. The arrests had rattled the criminals, but not broken their resolve. Ryan had sensed the tension escalating, and so had the neighborhood. Volunteers gathered with a mix of apprehension and determination, their faces set in grim lines as they prepared to face whatever came. Stay sharp, Ryan told the group, his voice low but commanding. We know they're coming. We've got to protect each other. Coda growled softly, the sound vibrating through Ryan's palm as he patted the dog's head. The Malamute was a force of nature, steady, fierce, and unyielding. Tonight, he was more than a companion. He was a guardian. The patrol moved through the streets in pairs and small groups, flashlights cutting swaths through the darkness. Ryan and Coda took the lead, navigating the winding roads with practiced ease. The quiet was deceptive, each shadow a potential threat, each sudden noise a spark of alarm. As they neared the cul-de-sac, where several recent break-ins had occurred, Coda's body tensed, nostrils flaring as he caught a scent on the air. Ryan's grip tightened on the leash, eyes scanning the shadows. A sudden movement, figures darting from house to house, masked and swift, set the patrol into motion. Ryan's voice rang out, clear and authoritative. Intruders, move to intercept. Coda surged forward, barking loudly to alert neighbors and disorient the attackers. The street erupted into chaos as residents poured out of their homes, grabbing flashlights, phones, anything to help. The element of surprise was lost for the criminals, replaced by a wall of resistance. One assailant lunged toward a woman trying to retreat into her house. Coda intercepted, teeth snapping inches from the attacker's arm, forcing him back. Ryan moved swiftly, blocking another who aimed a crowbar at a nearby window. The confrontation was a blur of movement and noise. Shouts, barking, the crash of glass. But the neighborhood held firm. The collective vigilance and preparation paid off as the police arrived, sirens wailing and lights flashing, cutting off escape routes. In the aftermath, several burglars were apprehended, their coordinated attack thwarted by the community's united front. The streets, once shadowed by fear, now echoed with relieved sighs and tentative smiles. Mrs. Harper, standing beside Ryan, watched the scene unfold with a mix of pride and exhaustion. I never imagined we'd face something like this, she said softly. But I'm glad we stood together. Ryan nodded, the weight of the night settling on his shoulders. It's what we needed to do, to protect what's ours. As dawn broke, the neighborhood stirred with a new energy. The fear that had once gripped their hearts was replaced by a cautious optimism. Ryan and Coda, once viewed with suspicion, were now celebrated as heroes, symbols of courage and loyalty. The night's events forged bonds that would outlast the threat, reminding everyone that in unity lay strength. And as Ryan looked over the faces of his neighbors, he knew that the fight was far from over. But together, they were ready. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains as Ryan sat at his kitchen table, the neighborhood slowly waking beyond the window. Coda lay curled at his feet, his breathing steady and calm, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had gripped the community just weeks before. The quiet was no longer fragile. It was earned, a testament to the resilience and unity forged in the fires of adversity. Across the street, Mrs. Harper tended her garden, her movements measured but purposeful. Ryan watched her from the porch, a sense of warmth settling in his chest. The woman who had once viewed him and Coda with suspicion now stood as a pillar of the neighborhood. Her earlier complaints replaced by gratitude and respect. At the recent community meeting, the local police chief had publicly acknowledged the role Ryan and Coda played in thwarting the burglary ring. The arrests had exposed a deeper criminal network that had preyed on the elderly, and the neighborhood was beginning to heal from the wounds left behind. Ryan's phone buzzed, a message from Mrs. Harper inviting him and Coda over for tea. He smiled, knowing how far they had come. The shared ordeal had transformed strangers into allies, and the bonds formed were stronger than any fear that had once divided them. As he stepped outside, Coda's tail wagged, his eyes bright with anticipation. The dog's presence had become a symbol of protection and trust, bridging the gap between Ryan's past and his new life. Together, they walked the familiar path to Mrs. Harper's porch, the neighborhood alive with the sounds of children playing and neighbors greeting one another. Mrs. Harper greeted them with a genuine smile, inviting them inside. Over cups of tea, they spoke not of fear or danger, but of hope in the future. Plans were made for a wildlife rescue center, a community garden, and events to strengthen the neighborhood spirit. Ryan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The peace he had sought was no longer a distant dream, but a living reality, shaped by courage, loyalty, and the unexpected friendships forged through hardship. As the afternoon light waned, Ryan looked out over the street, Coda resting contentedly by his side. Together, they had turned a story of violence into one of hope and resilience. The neighborhood, once fractured, now stood united, a testament to the power of understanding, trust, and the enduring bonds that can emerge from even the darkest of times.